power where he shouldn't have found it, and giving back to his family and bringing them along with him. I don't know. You can disagree.
No, I mean, look, I think that you'd lose a lot, okay? I think that's fair to say, including, by the way, the next 4 of Nolan's movies.
Yes.
So, to return, right.
Yes. Yes.
I think that a lot of what we learn from Genesis is how to behave and how not to behave. And a lot of what Genesis teaches is that if you behave like the people in this book, if that's how your family operates, right, with deceit and backstabbing and choosing one child over the other, and all of these terrible traits that we would never want in our own family, you end up alone in a coffin in Egypt.
Right.
Right? So part of it is how do we redeem ourselves, and part of it is how do we grow up as a people, right? How do we grow up? And Genesis is how we learn about our forefathers and foremothers, and we learn our identity. And in many ways, I think it's very much like a preamble to the document, right? It's a really important preamble to the document that, you know, how we function as a people.
And it's a good reminder that people weren't any better then than they are now. Seriously, I mean, when you talk about families, I mean, everybody talks about families and it emphasizes family. Well, the families in Genesis, I mean, Adam and Eve, and they have 2 kids, Cain and Abel. One tries to kill the other. And Abraham and Sarah have 2 kids. One he throws out of the house, the other he takes up to a mountain to die. These are not happy families. And nobody does better, except, as Rabbi Brous just pointed out, at the end, there's some redemption and healing. So it's both powerful and endlessly interpretable.
I believe that part of what Genesis offers us is stories of moral failure so that we learn what to do after moral failure. So in other words, we're not supposed to model our behavior after the behavior of these characters, but rather to recognize in them our own failures and to see how they keep living even after coming down from the mountain where they were willing to make the biggest mistake of a person's life. And even still, they have to wake up the next morning and start life again. And so I think it's not that we're supposed to try to be like Abraham in the moment where he makes the decision to take his son up the mountain, but rather that we see the failure of Abraham, recognize it in our own, and then take steps the next morning after our own mistakes as well.
You say in the movie, we're not creating anything. There was a moment where you're saying, or is it you saying it or somebody saying it? I think it was you in the narration. Do you really think that that's true? I think that there are so many things being created now and so much trouble in the world at the same time, and that in some way it echoes on a different level the stories that we're talking about.
What I'm talking about specifically there is the economy. And so I think that we get in trouble as a country when we don't focus on creation and manufacturing, when we focus on swapping derivatives, when we focus on emptiness, on just pushing paper. The emptiness actually comes to roost, and we end up with emptiness. And that's what I think is one of the morals of Genesis. And it might be that I was born and raised in Chicago, and I believe in people putting in a hard day of work, and I believe in these great values I grew up with, but I don't see. Everybody grows up wanting to be a filmmaker or wanting to be an investment banker or wanting to be, and at the end of the day, we have to think to ourselves, what are we actually creating as a society? And the creativity is part of it, but part of it is that we have to actually make stuff, right? We have to show people what it is that we're making. And we lose transparency when we stop making stuff and we start selling only the rights to the things that other people make. That's what I'm talking about when I say that we stop creating.
So I picking up on that, there was a book that came out in the 60s or 70s by Daniel Bell, the sociologist, called The Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism. And it was about the fact that capitalism depends on values that capitalism itself destroys. And what he meant is that capitalism depends on thrift and families and hard work and all those things. But if you discover you can make a lot of money by not working very hard, or by exploiting someone else. Capitalism rewards that even as it erodes capitalism itself. And what you hear on the right and the left in different ways is we need to reassert fundamental values in order to make the economic system that we believe in work the way it's supposed to work, even though it has a tendency to tear away at those very values. And it's something that America has to come to grips with. And by the way, I think the right and the left both have pieces of the values that we're missing, but the two of them have to, and you heard it from the people in the film. One of the things that was so nice about the film was, yes, it was perhaps over presidentially generous to one candidate, but who was the only candidate in the film. But you heard a variety of voices seriously across the political spectrum interpreting Genesis as a value book in very different ways, which was great.
Yeah.
So just as an explanation, when I brought Governor Huckabee into the movie, he was the host of Huckabee, the show on Fox News Channel. And actually, the executive producer of the film, Amy Lumet, she saw the first 10 minutes of the movie, and she asked me if you could get one more interview, who would it be? So the whole movie was basically done. She watched the 10 minutes that we screened for several people, and without a doubt, I knew the wish list off the top of my head at this point. And the first name that I said to her was Mike Huckabee, because I knew who she knew, but I also knew that this is somebody with a pastoral background who I think would want to be part of the project. And the day that he announced that he was leaving Fox News, I was supposed to be on Fox News 10 days later on his show.
Yeah.
So his running for president.
Hurt the movie.
Hurt the
It hurt the movie, basically.
It brings a lot of attention to the movie. That certainly does.
Gives you another audience.
Right. But we missed the platform, and I'll always be grateful, though, that I sent the email to his producer 6 hours later. I had an email back from him saying that he would be in the movie, and the reason that we couldn't have a conversation was because he was flying to Jerusalem at that time to meet with the 3 families of the boys that were kidnapped.
Oh, really?
And it was amazing. It was amazing. And he's an amazing person in person, and I'm sure all the candidates are. That's the truth, is that when you sit with any of the people in the movie and spend the day with them, I can tell you that the blessing of the movie are the people that I've been introduced to along the way. It's an amazing, amazing thing to think that I have sat with rabbis and presidential candidates and Alan Dershowitz, and I grew up in Chicago, and if you'd asked me what the inside of the Archdiocese looks like, I would not have told you that it's a medieval castle just situated in the middle of the downtown area. But that's the truth. You walk through the hallways and it's lit by candlelight. And I went to the Rebbe of Creationism, Ken Ham, and that was I'd never been to Kentucky before, and it was an amazing experience. And so I bring that experience to Jews everywhere who probably will never go to Kentucky and not be at the Creation Museum. So I did it for all of you.
Welcome to journalism. It's the wonder of getting to meet people that you wouldn't otherwise have a chance. I was particularly taken by the priest in the shelter, and by the families who spoke to you there, because I think that it's the fact that he chooses to live that life. It's not just a mitzvah day. It's actually spending his life there. And I thought that in some ways that may have been a part of the message of the film as well, is to embrace this as the messages of the Bible as your life. I don't know. And the family that was talking with their child there in the stroller, it was very moving, I thought.
But one of the things that always, I think we all feel as religious people that's upsetting is that non-religious people have no idea how much good, disinterested good just because God tells you have to go to Haiti and rebuild houses for 20 years, people do. And so, unfortunately, as is true of many things, but it's certainly true of religion, the evils that religion wreaks on the world are always on the front page, and this guy would never be known, were it not Duffy, right? Wasn't that his name? The Franciscan would never be known if it weren't for the movie. And he's been doing this it's amazing.
Yeah. Rabbi Brous, that's a lot of the calling that you try to bring to, I think the social action that you try to bring to your congregation as well is to try and go out into the community and not just stay in the synagogue or the setting. And I wondered if you had anything to add on that topic.
Yeah, it is interesting. Most of the people who feel a sense of connection to Genesis, who you interviewed, are in rooms with a lot of books behind them. And most of the people who feel really disconnected are out on the street living life. And then this break, except for this guy, Ham, right? Except for Ken Ham, because he builds this museum out in the world. But and then this priest breaks that mold, and he really his Torah will not live in a room with a lot of books, but rather, and not in the sanctuary, not on the bima. His Torah lives out on the street, and I was very moved also by that journey that you took us in. I mean, it's in some ways it's an implied critique of the rest of us, who are being interviewed with books behind our heads, which is, I don't know if you meant that, but I take that seriously, and we all should actually. I mean, if the Torah we're preaching makes people feel really good while they're sitting in the seats in their comfortable pews in our sanctuaries, then it does nothing but entertain us. And what that priest is actually doing is showing us what it means when Torah comes alive.
When I went to interview Father Duffy in Kensington, it was the only time in the movie where I felt in danger, right? So a cab pulled up, dropped us off. I gave him money. He didn't give me change. He slammed the door and drove away. And we were left on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases full of camera equipment with stickers all over it that said, "Media, please handle fragile." And with all of these people in the community standing around us, and I was dressed in a suit and tie, and I stuck out, for a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. And Father Duffy came out, and literally the sea parted for him. He walked out, and all of these people, immediately you felt reverence, and you felt respect, and I felt safe. And he took us into the building, and he said, "We're not going to want to do the interview here." Just like all of the other subjects in the movie, he said, "You're not going to want to do the interview here. Let's do it upstairs in the sanctuary." And we walked up into the sanctuary. We carried all the suitcases upstairs, which is what I remember, right? In these rickety steps, very narrow path. And we end up in the sanctuary, which is absolutely silent. And there's probably 8 folding chairs in the room. And there's an altar, and there's a crucifix, and Father Duffy says, "This is much better for you, isn't it?" And the sound guy immediately said, "This is perfect. Thank you very much." And I said, "This is awful. This is awful, because if we do the interview in here, nobody will see what I just saw."
Yeah.
Right? And after I did that interview, I'll never forget. We started the interview, and Josh, the cinematographer, we did the first shot, the first 5 minutes or whatever, and he turned to the sound guy. And he said, "How does it sound to you?" And he said, "It sounds like we're in a homeless shelter right underneath the subway." I thought to myself, great. And then every phase of the movie, the next creative, always, that was their first question, is why did I pick that location? Mm-hmm. But just think how different the movie would be if I had chosen the sanctuary, right? And if everybody's instinct was to put me in an office or away from action. And the truth is, I did the LA interviews before I went out into the world and started to do other interviews. And I learned along the way. The movie had a creative curve in and of itself. And that's the truth, is I see the movie, and all of you see 75-minute movie, and I see the 40 hours of movie that I shot, right? And so I see Rabbi Brous talking about Ezer Kenegdo, that did not make the movie. And I see Rabbi Wolpe talking about the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia and how America has a special relationship with the Bible, and that didn't make the movie. And I could talk about great quotes from every single person in the movie that did not make the movie.
We all got cut for Huckabee.
Right. That's right. That's right.
It's okay.
No. Rabbi Wolpe, you wanted to...
I was just going to say, you can, next time, for Exodus, shoot in the board meetings, and you'll see what the synagogue, like you'll see the guts of the synagogue.
You'll see the Israelites.
In a beautiful way.
I want to take some questions from the audience. There's one in the back there.